Hello again, nice to see you back here. Today, we'll be looking at 2016's 1050 Ti, once hailed a hero to budget gamers with low power systems everywhere because of their ability to perform decently without a PCIe power connector. The model I have is a Gigabyte D5 with 4GB of VRAM and a boost clock of 1430 MHz. As usual, the Stormtrooper PC with a Ryzen 5 2600X and 16GB of 3200 MHz RAM are the base. Let's see if it's still good enough. Deathly Stillness at 1080p high preset with an average of 49 FPS didn't feel terrible but wasn't good enough to be totally smooth. After switching to mid preset, graphically I could barely tell much difference while playing, but hitting a 60 FPS average was fairly obvious. If all you want to do is pop zombie skulls in this, or other older games, the 1050 Ti is still capable. I was a little surprised that City Skylines kept a 60 FPS average at 1080p default settings, but even then, I'm not sure you'd notice a huge difference between 45 and 60 if you're playing a game like this one. The 0.1% low of 4.8 FPS seemed to come from turning the camera rapidly, making that motion feel stuttery. "1080p default, which is epic everything with TAA, in Journey to the Savage Planet didn't fare too well, and while I got over 30 FPS on average, I was sure just a few tweaks would get it to 60. Dropping to FXAA and the rest of the settings to medium doubled the frame rate, with an average of 79 FPS, and almost no impact visually, at least to me while playing. I can see it while editing this video, but during play it was imperceptible. Moving on to LEGO Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. This one is pretty straightforward, as 1080p default settings got an average of 73 FPS, a 1% low of 60, and 0.1% low of 50, making for a very smooth game, and one that the 1050 Ti is probably best suited for in 2023. Are you on a budget buying a used G923 to play some sim racing and need a budget PC? If you can find one with a 1050 Ti in it, it'll do fine. Although, not with a mid-high combination where the average was 43 FPS, a 1% low of 37, and a 0.1% low of 11. Altering the settings and going with a 1080p mid with mid anti-aliasing combination revs up the output to 65 FPS, a 1% low of 40 and 0.1% low of 30. This is great if you're on a budget and trying to get into sim racing, but the pop-in and drop in visual quality is extremely noticeable here. Let's move on to the games where the 1050 Ti is straight up lacking enough power anymore. Call of Duty Warzone 2 1080p balanced provides a cinematic 24 FPS that feels bloody awful to play at. So I decided to try 1080p balanced with FSR 2.1 at balanced as well. This still only managed 40 FPS, but when I tell you it looked muddy and gross, it was horrible. I'm comparing it to my usual 1440p at Ultra, so it's hard to tell if someone used to 900p or 1080p would be able to tell a difference either. There are two ways to expect to play this game: 1080p 30 FPS with FSR 2.1 at quality, which is just not going to be competitive, or 720p basic, which will look awful, but at least it'll be smooth. My thought? Don't expect to play this game with a 1050 Ti. Cyberpunk 2077 is inevitably similar. Go into this aiming for 30 FPS, but don't expect outstanding visuals. 1080p low with FSR Auto came close to a 30 FPS average, but it was stuttery and inconsistent with a 1 and 0.1% low of 19 and 5. Sticking with 1080p low and taking FSR to ultra performance had a drastic impact. A 50% increase in the average frame rate up to 44 now, but a 50% increase in the pain my eyes had to go through as well. Here's the thing though, if you watched this and didn't notice much difference, then good news! I have a recommendation for you to play this game at 30 FPS. You can effectively ignore this 900p run, as I put it in here to show you that it's not worth dropping this far if you're going for 30 FPS. Instead, my recommendation is to go for 1080p low with FSR performance. This will give you a consistent and smooth game, less degraded visuals, and be the optimal outcome with a 1050 Ti. With all that in mind, would I recommend that you buy one in 2023? No, I wouldn't. There will be edge cases where this might be the only thing that fits your needs, and if that's the case, I'd suggest not paying more than $50. 4GB of VRAM is quickly going out of fashion. Newer games will consistently require upscaling tech just to reach 30 FPS at 1080p, if not 720p, and quite frankly, for around $75, you could probably find an 8GB RX 580. Sure, it's missing modern Radeon driver features, that's what the 5500 XT is for, but it's 40% more power than a 1050 Ti. It's coming to the end of its mainstream usable life, and in the next video, we'll look at the 1063GB, which falls into a similar category of budget-oriented GPUs. Until then, thank you for watching, please do all the usual YouTube stuff. I've been Joss, I'll see you next time.